12 years of marriage collapsed on a Tuesday evening in November. Nothing special about that day. No anniversary, no birthday, just an ordinary weeknight. I'd performed 2 bypass surgeries and a valve replacement. Standard procedures for me. I came home later than planned because the second patient had complications. A bleed that took extra time to control. By the time I walked through our front door, it was almost 9 p.m. Emily was sitting in the dark living room, a glass of red wine in her hand, the bottle nearly empty on the coffee table. The only light came from the fireplace, casting dramatic shadows across her face. Even in the dim light, I could see her eyes were red from crying. "You missed the gallery opening," she said quietly as I set down my briefcase. "Shit, the charity event at her gallery. She'd been planning it for months, featuring new artists raising money for children's art therapy. She'd reminded me just that morning. Emily, I'm so sorry. Mrs. Richardson's bypass had complications, and I couldn't. Save it, Jack." She took another sip of wine. "I've heard it all before. The patient needed you. The hospital needed you. Everyone needs you except your wife." I loosened my tie and sat down across from her. "That's not fair. You know my job." "Your job," she interrupted, her voice sharp now. "Your precious job. Do you know what tonight was?" The mayor was there, 3 newspaper critics. It was the biggest night of my career, and my husband couldn't be bothered to show up or even call. "I was in surgery, Em. I couldn't just step out to make a phone call while a woman was open on my table." "You could have had a nurse call. You could have done something." She set down her glass with deliberate control. "But you didn't even think of me, did you? I don't even register on your priority list." I ran my hand through my hair, exhaustion seeping into my bones. "I save lives, Emily. That's what I do. Sometimes that means I miss events. You knew what you were getting into when you married a surgeon." Her laugh was hollow, empty of any warmth. Did I? Did I really know I was marrying a man who would gradually turn into a machine? A man who can hold a beating heart in his hands, but can't hold his wife when she's crying? A man who remembers every detail of his patient's medical histories, but forgets his anniversary 3 years in a row? "That's not fair," I repeated, but the defense sounded weak even to my ears. "You know what's not fair?" Emily stood up, her slender frame suddenly tense with anger. "Living with a ghost, coming home to a house that feels empty even when you're in it, trying to have a conversation with someone who's physically present but mentally still in the operating room." I remained seated, watching her pace. This wasn't our first argument about my work hours or emotional availability, but something felt different at this time. There was a finality in her movements, a resignation in her voice that set alarm bells ringing in my head. "What do you want from me, Emily? I can't change who I am. I can't suddenly become some emotional, expressive person. This is me. This is who you married." She stopped pacing and looked at me directly, her gaze steady despite the wine she'd consumed. "No, Jack. The man I married laughed. He told me about his day. He got excited about weekend trips and held my hand during sad movies. He wasn't warm and fuzzy, but he was present. You?" She gestured at me dismissively. "You're like a robot going through the motions of a marriage, and I can't do it anymore." The words hung in the air between us. I waited for her to soften them, to add a "but" or "maybe if we tried," but she didn't. She just stood there looking at me like I was a stranger. "You can't do what anymore?" I finally asked, though I already knew the answer. "This," she said, waving her hand between us. "Us. I can't stand living like this anymore, Jack. I can't stand coming second to everything all. I can't stand your coldness, your distance. I feel like I'm drowning in this marriage, and you're not even noticing, let alone throwing me a lifeline." I should have argued, should have promised to change, to try harder, to be more present. That's what the old Jack might have done, but she was right about one thing. I had changed. Years of making split-second decisions with lives in the balance, of maintaining perfect control while cutting into human flesh, of delivering devastating news to families. It changes you. It builds walls that protect you from breaking down when you need to be strong. So instead of fighting for our marriage, I simply nodded and said, "I understand." Her eyes widened slightly, perhaps expecting more resistance. When none came, her shoulders slumped. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're saying you want a divorce, I stated plainly. Emily flinched at the word but nodded. Yes, I think I do. I stood up, straightening my wrinkled shirt. I'll pack some things tonight. I can stay at the hospital's visiting physician's quarters until I find a place. Just like that? Her voice cracked. 12 years of marriage, and you're just going to walk away without a fight? I looked at her, really looked at her for what felt like the first time in years. She was still beautiful, her dark hair falling in waves around her heart-shaped face, her artist's hands expressive even in stillness. But the light in her eyes when she looked at me had gone out long ago. What would you have me say, Emily? That I'll change? We both know I won't, not because I don't want to, but because I don't know how anymore. This job, these patients, they've rewired me. You deserve someone who can give you what you need. A tear slipped down her cheek. I wanted that someone to be you. So did I admitted quietly. But we can't keep hurting each other, waiting for something that isn't going to happen. I went upstairs and packed a suitcase with mechanical efficiency, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the framed photo of Emily and me from our honeymoon in Greece. Everything else could wait. When I came back downstairs, she was still standing in the same spot, as if frozen in time. I'll have my lawyer contact you, I said, reaching for the door. Jack, she called out, stopping me. I turned back, and for a moment I thought she might ask me to stay. Instead, she said, Was I ever enough for you? The question hit me like a physical blow. Was she enough? She was everything. But somewhere along the way, I'd lost the ability to show her that, to show her anything beyond the composed, controlled surgeon the world needed me to be. You were always too good for money, I answered honestly. I just proved it by becoming someone you couldn't love anymore. Before she could respond, I walked out the door, closing it softly behind me. The next 6 months passed in a fog of work and isolation. I found a small apartment near the hospital, sterile, minimalist, and eerily similar to an on-call room. I threw myself into my practice with renewed intensity, taking the most difficult cases, working longer hours, volunteering for emergency surgeries. My lawyer sent papers. I signed them without reading the details. Emily could have the house, the art collection we'd built together, the vacation property in Vermont. I kept my retirement accounts and investments. Clean, simple, unemotional, like a well-executed surgery. Then came the call that changed everything. I was just finishing rounds when my phone rang. An unknown number. I nearly declined it, but some instinct made me answer. Dr. Miller, I said, stepping into an empty consultation room. Jack? The voice was familiar but distorted by panic. Jack, it's Emily. My heart rate spiked, the first strong emotion I'd felt in months. Emily, what's wrong? It's Dad, she sobbed. He collapsed at dinner. They think it's his heart. The ambulance is taking him to Boston Memorial right now. Robert Green, Emily's father. 64 years old, history of hypertension, cholesterol issues. He'd been like a father to me, too, welcoming me into their family with open arms when my own parents had been dead for years. I'm at Memorial now, I said, already moving toward the emergency department. I'll meet the ambulance. I'm on my way to the hospital now, she finished. Please, Jack. I know things ended badly between us, but he loves you. Please help him. I'll do everything I can, I promised, then ended the call as I reached the ER just as the ambulance doors swung open. I didn't wait for introductions. Robert Green, 64, suspected MI, I said to the attending ER physician. I'm Dr. Miller, cardiothoracic. The doctor, Matthews according to his badge, raised an eyebrow but didn't question my involvement. Just arriving now. You know the patient? My father-in-law, I said, not bothering to correct the present tense. X, I added as an afterthought. Matthews nodded and led me to Trauma 1, where the paramedics were transferring Robert to a hospital bed. He was conscious but ashen, an oxygen mask covering his face, EKG leads already being attached to his chest by efficient nurses. Robert, I said, stepping to his side, it's Jack. You're at Boston Memorial. We're going to take care of you. His eyes found mine, pain and fear evident in them. He tried to speak through the mask. Don't try to talk. I advised, then turned to the nearest nurse. Get a 12-lead ecom, cardiac enzymes, portable chest x-ray, and page Dr. Sanderson. Karen Sanderson was our best cardiologist, the person I'd want interpreting Robert's results. The next 30 minutes were a blur of activity. Tests ordered, results analyzed, Robert's condition deteriorating rapidly before our eyes. By the time Dr. Sanderson arrived, I had already reviewed the EKG and cardiac enzyme results. The diagnosis was clear and devastating. Massive myocardial infarction with significant ST elevation. Robert was in the midst of a major heart attack, one that was causing substantial damage with each passing minute. We need to get him to cath lab immediately, Sanderson said after her own rapid assessment. He needs angioplasty and likely stenting. I nodded in agreement, but something about Robert's presentation concerned me. The echocardiogram is showing potential valve involvement, and look at his right coronary artery on the EKG. Sanderson looked where I was pointing and frowned. You think there's more extensive damage? I think we need to be prepared for the possibility that angioplasty alone won't be sufficient. Have an OR ready for emergency bypass if needed. She gave me a long look, then nodded. I'll make the call. Are you scrubbing in if we need surgery? The question caught me off guard. Hospital policy generally discouraged surgeons from operating on family members, even former ones. But before I could answer, Robert's monitors began blaring. His blood pressure was dropping precipitously, and the cardiac rhythm on the monitor had changed to a dangerous pattern. He's going into cardiogenic shock, I said, moving to the head of the bed. We don't have time for cath lab. He needs surgery now. Sanderson didn't argue. I'll call the OR. Who's your first assist? Page Dr. Leung, I said, naming my most trusted surgical colleague. And tell them to prepare for a complex case, likely triple bypass with possible valve repair. As the team rushed to prepare Robert for emergency surgery, Emily burst into the trauma room, her face a mask of terror. She froze when she saw me standing over her father, my hand on his shoulder as I explained what was happening. Jack, she gasped. He's having a massive heart attack, I said, my voice automatically shifting to the calm, authoritative tone I used with patients' families. We're taking him to surgery immediately. Surgery? Her eyes widened. But I thought for heart attacks they do that procedure with the balloon and stents. In most cases, yes, but your father's situation is more complex. The damage is extensive, and he's developing complications that require immediate surgical intervention. She swayed slightly, and I instinctively reached out to steady her. She flinched at my touch, then immediately looked apologetic. Who's doing the surgery? She asked. This was the moment I should have explained hospital policy, should have recommended one of my equally capable colleagues, should have maintained appropriate professional boundaries. Instead, I said, I am. Emily's mouth opened in surprise. Can you do that? I mean, legally or ethically or whatever. Was your family, I finished for her. Yes, and technically I shouldn't. But I'm the best there is at this particular procedure, and given the complexity of his case, I'm not willing to hand it off. I held her gaze steadily. Unless you object. She studied my face, searching for something. Reassurance, perhaps, or any sign of the emotional connection we'd once shared. Will you be able to, if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong, I said with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. I won't let it. The transport team arrived to take Robert to the OR, and our time was up. I turned to follow them, but Emily caught my arm. Jack, she said, her voice breaking. Thank you. I nodded once, then followed the gurney, already mentally preparing for the complex procedure ahead. 4 hours into the surgery, I knew we were in trouble. What had started as a triple bypass had become more complicated when we discovered that the damage to Robert's heart was even more extensive than the tests had indicated. His right coronary artery was almost completely occluded, and the left anterior descending artery, the infamous widowmaker, was severely compromised as well. Additionally, his mitral valve had sustained damage that would require repair. BP's dropping again, Dr. Leung reported from across the table. He's not stabilizing. More volume, I ordered, not taking my eyes off the delicate suturing I was performing on the bypass graft. And let's get another unit of blood ready. The anesthesiologist spoke up from behind me. He's becoming difficult to ventilate. Pulmonary pressures are rising, a complication we'd been trying to avoid. Pulmonary edema, fluid building up in Robert's lungs as his damaged heart struggled to pump effectively. It would make the surgery more difficult and the recovery more perilous. For a moment, just a moment, I felt a crack in my professional detachment. This wasn't just any patient. This was Robert, who had taught me to fly fish, who had helped me pick out Emily's engagement ring, who had stood beside me at our small wedding ceremony and welcomed me as a son, and waiting outside was Emily, trusting me to save her father's life despite everything that had happened between us. "Dr. Miller?" Leung prompted, concern in his voice. "Do you want to place him on bypass?" The cardiopulmonary bypass machine, essentially an artificial heart and lungs that would take over the function of Robert's organs while we completed the repairs. It was a standard procedure in complex cardiac surgeries, but it came with its own risks, especially for older patients. Not yet, I decided. Let's complete this graft first. It should improve perfusion enough to stabilize him. The next 2 hours were among the most intense of my surgical career. Robert's condition fluctuated dangerously, requiring constant adjustments to keep him stable enough for me to complete the necessary repairs. Every suture had to be perfect, every decision precisely calculated. There was zero margin for error. By the time I was closing Robert's chest, the OR team was exhausted but quietly triumphant. Against considerable odds, we had completed the triple bypass and valve repair successfully. Robert's vital signs had stabilized, and early indicators suggested good perfusion to previously compromised heart tissue. As soon as I pushed through the double doors into the waiting area, Emily jumped to her feet, her face pale and drawn from hours of anxious waiting. She didn't say a word, just looked at me with those expressive eyes that had once been able to read my every thought. "He made it," I said simply. "The surgery was complex but successful. He's being moved to cardiac ICU now." Her hands flew to her mouth and a sob escaped between her fingers. "He's really okay?" "He's not out of the woods yet," I cautioned, falling back on medical terminology. "The next 48 hours will be critical. But yes, barring complications, he should recover." I expected a nod, maybe a thank you. What I didn't expect was for Emily to throw herself into my arms, clinging to me as she broke down completely. Instinctively, my arms went around her, holding her as her body shook with relief and residual fear. "I was so scared," she whispered against my scrubs. "When they said it would be hours, that it was complicated. I thought I was going to lose him too." The word hung between us. Had she felt she'd lost me as well? Or was I reading too much into a casual turn of phrase? "He's strong," I said, carefully extracting myself from her embrace. "And he has excellent medical care. Dr. Rosenbaum will be overseeing his recovery in the ICU. She's the best we have." Emily wiped her tears, visibly pulling herself together. "When can I see him?" "They're settling him in ICU now. Once he's stable, you can have a brief visit. He won't be conscious yet. We'll keep him sedated and on a ventilator for at least 24 hours to give his body time to begin healing." She nodded, then surprised me by taking my hand. "Will you come with me when I see him? I don't think I can face all those machines and tubes alone." The request was reasonable from a family member, less so from an ex-wife, but I found myself nodding. "Of course, let me check on his status, and I'll come back for you." Despite my warnings, she gasped when she saw her father. Robert lay motionless amid a tangle of tubes and wires, his chest heavily bandaged, a ventilator breathing for him, multiple IV lines delivering medications and fluids. It was a shocking sight for anyone not accustomed to post-cardiac surgery patients. "All of this is normal," I assured her, moving to Robert's bedside. "The ventilator is temporary, just until the anesthesia wears off completely, and we're confident his lungs can function on their own. These monitors track his heart rhythm, blood pressure, oxygen levels. The IVs are providing pain medication, antibiotics, and other necessary medications." Emily approached cautiously, reaching for her father's hand where it lay on the white hospital sheet. "Can he hear me?" "Possibly. Many patients report later that they were aware of voices even while sedated. You can talk to him if you want." She nodded, then leaned closer to Robert. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "It's Emily. I'm right here. You're going to be okay." Jack fixed your heart. She glanced up at me, tears shining in her eyes. He saved you. Something shifted in my chest at her words, a crack in the wall I'd built around my emotions. I looked down at Robert, this man who had been more father to me than my own, and felt the first stirrings of something beyond professional satisfaction at a successful surgery. Relief, gratitude, and yes, love, the familial love I'd thought had been severed along with my marriage. 3 days later, Robert was recovering well enough to be moved out of ICU into a regular cardiac care room. He was off the ventilator, alert and oriented, though still weak and in considerable pain from the sternotomy. I visited him each morning during rounds and again each evening before leaving the hospital, carefully timing my visits to avoid Emily when possible. But on the 4th day, my luck ran out. I entered Robert's room to find Emily arranging flowers on the windowsill, her back to the door. She turned at the sound of my entry, and for a moment we just looked at each other. "Jack," she said, breaking the silence, "I was hoping to see you. How is he today?" We said, moving to check Robert's chart at the foot of his bed. "Complaining about the food and asking when he can go home. So I'd say he's feeling more like himself," she replied with a small smile. "He just fell asleep about 20 minutes ago." I nodded, reviewing the latest lab results and vital signs. "His progress is excellent. If he continues this way, he could be discharged early next week." "That's what Dr. Rosenbaum said too." Emily hesitated, then added, "She also said we were lucky you were there when it happened. That most surgeons wouldn't have recognized the valve involvement so quickly." I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It's my job to notice these things." "It's more than a job to you, though, isn't it?" She moved closer, studying me with those perceptive eyes. "It's who you are." The comment echoed our last argument too closely for comfort. "Emily, no, wait," she interrupted. "That came out wrong. I meant it as a compliment this time." She took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days. About us. About what happened between us." I glanced at Robert's sleeping form, then back to Emily. "This isn't the place for this conversation." "Maybe not," she acknowledged, "but I'm not sure there is a right place. And I need to say this while I have the courage." She twisted her hands together nervously. "I was wrong, Jack. Not about everything. There were real problems in our marriage. But I was wrong to make your dedication to your work sound like a character flaw. Wrong to resent the very thing that makes you extraordinary." Her words caught me completely off guard. "Emily, please let me finish," she said. "Watching you these past few days, seeing the way you care for Dad, the way the entire hospital staff respects you, the lives you save every day, it's made me see things differently. What I called coldness was actually your way of staying strong for your patients. What I called distance was your way of processing the enormous responsibility you carry." She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her familiar perfume. Jasmine and vanilla, the scent I'd associated with home for 12 years. "I'm not saying I was wrong to want more from our marriage," she continued, "but I was wrong to make it all your fault. I could have tried harder to understand your world instead of expecting you to live entirely in mine." I stood frozen, unable to form a response. After months of numbness, emotions were flooding back too fast to process. Anger, grief, longing, confusion, and something dangerously like hope. "What are you saying exactly?" I finally managed to ask. Emily looked down, then back up at me with determination in her eyes. "I'm saying I miss you. I'm saying I made a mistake. I'm saying maybe we gave up too easily." The monitor beside Robert's bed beeped, making us both jump. Just a routine alert, nothing concerning, but enough to break the moment and remind me where we were. "This isn't the time or place," I repeated, more firmly this time. "Your father needs rest, and I have patients waiting." Disappointment flashed across her face, but she nodded. "You're right, I'm sorry." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, holding it out to me. "My new cell number, in case you want to talk. Later, I mean, when you're ready." I hesitated, then took the card, tucking it into my lab coat pocket. "I should go." "Jack," she called softly as I reached the door. I paused but didn't turn around. Thank you for saving him, for being exactly who you are. I left without responding, my thoughts in turmoil. That night, I sat in my sparse apartment, Emily's card on the coffee table in front of me. I'd poured a glass of scotch but hadn't touched it, too preoccupied with replaying our conversation in my mind. I'm saying I miss you. I'm saying I made a mistake. My phone rang, breaking into my thoughts. The hospital's number. Automatically, I answered, Dr. Miller. Jack, it's Karen Sanderson. I'm sorry to bother you at home, but we have a situation with Robert Greene. My body tensed instantly. What happened? He's developed a cardiac tamponade, fluid building up around the heart. We need to perform a pericardiocentesis immediately. Cardiac tamponade, a potentially life-threatening complication where fluid accumulates in the sac around the heart, preventing it from filling properly and effectively strangling it. It was rare after bypass surgery, but could be fatal if not treated promptly. I'm on my way, I said, already reaching for my keys. Has anyone called his daughter? Not yet. We wanted to assess the situation first. I'll call her, I decided. Just get the procedure room ready. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I ended the call and immediately dialed the number on Emily's card, my heart pounding as I rushed out the door to my car. She answered on the second ring. Jack, I didn't expect... Emily, listen carefully, I interrupted. Your father has developed a complication. It's called cardiac tamponade, fluid around the heart that's restricting its function. I'm on my way to the hospital now to perform a procedure to drain the fluid. You should come too. Her sharp intake of breath was audible over the phone. Is he going to be okay? If we act quickly, yes. The procedure itself is relatively straightforward, but the situation is serious. I won't lie to you about that. I'm leaving right now, she said, her voice shaking but resolute. Jack, thank you for calling me yourself. By the time I arrived at Boston Memorial, the team had already moved Robert to a procedure room and prepared the necessary equipment. I quickly reviewed his vitals: dangerously low blood pressure, elevated heart rate, labored breathing, all classic signs of cardiac tamponade. Let's get started, I said, washing my hands and donning sterile gloves. We don't have time to wait. The procedure required inserting a needle through the chest wall into the pericardial sac surrounding the heart, then threading a catheter through the needle to drain the accumulated fluid. It demanded precision and steady hands. One slip could puncture the heart itself. I was just positioning the ultrasound to guide the needle when Emily burst into the room, her face pale with fear. You can't be in here, a nurse started to say, moving to intercept her. Let her stay, I countermanded, not looking up from my preparation. Just stay back against that wall, Emily. Don't touch anything. She nodded mutely, pressing herself against the wall as instructed, her eyes fixed on her father's unconscious form. Beginning the procedure, I announced, positioning the needle at the precise spot indicated by the ultrasound. Everyone stand clear. The room fell silent as I slowly advanced the needle through the chest wall, my eyes alternating between the patient and the ultrasound screen, guiding my movements. When the needle reached the pericardial space, I carefully threaded the catheter through it. Catheter is in position, I reported, beginning drainage. Almost immediately, dark fluid began flowing through the catheter into the collection container. Robert's vital signs began to improve as the pressure on his heart diminished. Blood pressure rising, the nurse monitoring the vitals reported. Heart rate stabilizing. I continued draining the fluid until the ultrasound confirmed the pericardial sac was clear. Drainage complete. Let's secure the catheter in place. We'll want to monitor for reaccumulation over the next 24 hours. Once the catheter was secured and Robert's condition stabilized, I stepped back, allowing the nurses to finish adjusting his monitors and medications. Only then did I turn to Emily, who remained frozen against the wall, silent tears streaming down her face. He's stable, I told her, removing my gloves and moving to her side. The procedure, voice went perfectly. The fluid has been drained, and his heart is functioning much better now. What caused it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It's a known, though uncommon, complication after cardiac surgery. Sometimes inflammatory processes trigger fluid buildup. We'll run tests on the fluid we removed to determine the exact cause, but the important thing is we caught it in time. She nodded, wiping her tears with shaking hands. I saw on the monitor. His heart was barely beating before you started. The fluid was compressing it, preventing normal function. But the damage is reversible. He'll recover from this, Emily. Because of you, she said, looking up at me with those expressive eyes. Again. I shook my head. Because we have excellent monitoring protocols and an attentive nursing staff who noticed the symptoms early. Emily smiled faintly through her tears. Still deflecting compliments, I see. Despite the stress of the situation, I found myself returning her smile. Some habits don't change. It was nearly midnight when I returned to the cardiac ICU to check on Robert. His condition had remained stable since the procedure, his vital signs gradually improving as his heart function normalized. I reviewed his chart and the latest lab results, satisfied with his progress. I expected to find Emily asleep on the cot we'd arranged for her in the family waiting area. But when I glanced through the window, I saw her sitting upright beside her father's bed, holding his hand, her lips moving slightly as if in quiet conversation or prayer. I hesitated, not wanting to intrude on the private moment, but as I turned to leave, she looked up and saw me. She gestured for me to enter. How is he? I asked softly, moving to check the monitors and drainage catheter. Sleeping peacefully now, she replied, her voice rough with fatigue. He woke up briefly about an hour ago, seemed confused about what happened, but the nurse explained everything and gave him something to help him rest. Emily watched me as I examined the drainage output, her gaze so intent I could almost feel it physically. You look exhausted, Jack. I'm fine. No, you're not, she contradicted gently. You've been here for almost 20 hours straight. When was the last time you ate something or sat down for more than 5 minutes? I'll head home soon, I promised. Just wanted to make sure everything was stable here first. Emily stood, stretching her cramped muscles. I could use some air. Walk with me to the cafeteria? I think they still have that terrible coffee you inexplicably like. The invitation was casual, but her eyes held a tentative hope that made my chest tighten. I shouldn't leave the floor. Your father is stable and surrounded by excellent medical staff, she finished for me. 20 minutes, Jack. That's all I'm asking. Put that way, I couldn't reasonably refuse. All right, 20 minutes. We walked in companionable silence to the cafeteria, which was nearly deserted at this late hour. Emily insisted on buying the coffee again, returning to the table with 2 steaming cups and a packaged sandwich that she pushed in my direction. Eat, she ordered. You're no good to your patients if you collapse from hunger. Yes, ma'am, I replied, unwrapping the sandwich without argument. Only as I took the first bite did I realize how hungry I actually was. I set down the sandwich, meeting her gaze directly. What do you want from me, Emily? The blunt question seemed to catch her off guard. I don't know exactly. To talk, maybe? To understand what happened to us. To see if there's any way to... She trailed off, looking down at her coffee. To what? I pressed. Go back? Pretend the last 6 months never happened? No, she said, looking up with sudden resolve. Not to go back. To go forward, maybe. Differently this time. The words hung between us, laden with possibility and uncertainty. Part of me wanted to dismiss them outright, to protect myself from hoping for something that had already proven impossible once. But another part, a part I'd thought long silenced, urged me to listen. What would differently look like, Ga? I asked cautiously. Emily took a deep breath. I've been thinking about that a lot these past few days. Watching you with Dan and seeing you in your element, it made me realize something. I spent years trying to change you, to make you fit my idea of what a husband should be. I resented your work because it took you away from me, without ever really understanding what it gives to you and what it allows you to give to others. She reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin. What if, instead of fighting against who you are, I learned to work with it? What if we found ways to connect that don't require you to be someone you're not? That sounds nice in theory, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the hope beginning to bloom in my chest. But the reality is I'm still a cardiac surgeon. I'll still work long hours, miss events, be emotionally drained at the end of difficult days. I know, she acknowledged, and I'm still an artist who feels everything intensely and needs emotional connection. Those things haven't changed, but maybe our expectations of each other could. Meaning, meaning, maybe I stop expecting you to be the emotionally expressive partner I thought I needed, and instead appreciate the ways you do show love, like flying across the city in the middle of the night to save my father. She smiled faintly. And maybe you could try to make space for my world occasionally, even if it doesn't come naturally to you. It sounded reasonable when she put it that way, but experience had taught me that good intentions rarely survive the daily reality of our conflicting needs. We tried before, Emily. It didn't work. Did we really try, though? She challenged. Or did we just expect change without doing the work? Did we ever really talk about what we each needed, specifically, not just in vague terms? Before I could respond, my pager went off. I checked it. Another emergency case coming in, a car accident victim with a traumatic aortic rupture. The kind of case where minutes meant the difference between life and death. I have to go, I said, already standing. Emergency trauma case. Emily nodded, disappointment clear in her eyes, but no reproach. I understand. Go. I hesitated, torn between the immediate medical emergency and the emotional one unfolding between us. Emily, it's okay, she said, managing a small smile. This is who you are. Go save them. I nodded, already backing toward the door. We'll finish this conversation. I promise. The next 6 hours were a blur of focused intensity as I worked to repair the shattered aorta of a 22-year-old college student who'd been T-boned at an intersection. By the time I closed her chest, the sun was rising, casting long shadows through the OR windows. She would live. With luck and proper care, she would recover fully. When I reached Robert's room, I found both Emily and Robert awake. She was helping him with his breakfast, adjusting the bed to a more comfortable position as he complained good-naturedly about the hospital food. Jack, Robert exclaimed when he saw me, his voice stronger than I'd expected. Just the man I wanted to see. Tell this overprotective daughter of mine that I'm perfectly capable of feeding myself. Emily rolled her eyes but smiled. He's been like this all morning. I think we can safely say he's feeling better. I moved to the bedside, checking the monitors and examining the site where the drainage catheter had been. The numbers look good. How's the pain? Manageable, Robert replied, wincing slightly as he shifted position. Though I wouldn't say no to another dose of whatever magic you've been giving me. Emily watched me work, her eyes tired but clear. How was your emergency case? Successful? The fact that she asked, that she cared about the outcome of a stranger's surgery rather than just resenting the interruption, struck me deeply. Yes, young woman, car accident, aortic rupture. She'll make it. Good, Emily said simply, and I could see she meant it. Robert looked between us, a calculating expression on his face. Emily, sweetheart, why don't you go get some fresh air? You've been cooped up in here all night. She hesitated. Dad, I don't want to leave you alone. I'm hardly alone in a hospital full of medical personnel, he pointed out reasonably. Besides, Jack is here. He'll keep me company for a few minutes, won't you, Jack? Of course, I said, though I suspected Robert had more in mind than the simple companionship. After she left, Robert waited until the door closed completely before fixing me with a penetrating stare. So, you and my daughter, what's going on there? I raised an eyebrow. Shouldn't you be resting instead of interrogating your doctor? I'm multitasking, he replied dryly. And don't dodge the question. I may be recovering from heart surgery, but I'm not blind. Something's happening between you two. I sighed, pulling up a chair beside his bed. I'm not sure what's happening, to be honest. We've been talking. About reconciliation, he asked bluntly. Maybe. It's complicated. Robert snorted. Everything worthwhile is complicated, son. That's no reason to avoid it. The issues that broke us apart haven't magically disappeared, I pointed out. I'm still a workaholic surgeon. She still needs more emotional connection than I know how to give. True enough, he conceded, but you both seem different now. 6 months apart can change people's perspectives. I considered his words, wondering if he was right. Had Emily and I both changed enough to make a difference? Or were we setting ourselves up for more heartbreak? I don't want to hurt her again, I admitted quietly. Robert's expression softened. That's a good start. The fact that you're worried about hurting her rather than just protecting yourself. He shifted in bed, wincing slightly. Look, Jack, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will say this. When Margaret, Emily's mother, was alive, we had our share of problems. Two strong-willed people always do. But we figured it out because we decided the relationship was worth more than being right. Jack, Robert called as I reached the door. One more thing. Thank you for saving my life. Twice now. I nodded once, acknowledging his gratitude without deflecting it this time. Get some rest, Robert. 2 weeks later, Emily and I met for dinner at a small Italian restaurant we'd frequented during our marriage. Robert had been discharged from the hospital and was recovering well at home with visiting nurses to help with his care. This was the first time Emily and I had seen each other outside the hospital setting since his cardiac emergency. You look nice, she said as I joined her at the table. Non-surgical attire suits you. I smiled slightly, taking in her emerald dress that brought out the green flecks in her hazel eyes. You look beautiful, I replied, surprising myself with the directness of the compliment. A light blush colored her cheeks as she smiled. Thank you. As we finished our entrees, Emily set down her fork and looked at me directly. I've been thinking a lot about what we started to discuss that night in the hospital cafeteria, about doing things differently if we were to try again. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook, opening it to a page with a neatly written list. I made some notes, specific ideas, not just vague concepts like be more present or work less. She handed me the notebook. I scanned the items, impressed by their practicality and balance. The list included concrete suggestions like setting aside one protected evening each week for us, me giving advance notice when possible about late nights or emergencies, her not expecting me to attend every gallery event, but only the truly important ones, her finding other emotional outlets when I was drained, and both of us seeing a counselor who specialized in medical marriages. These are thoughtful, I said, genuinely impressed. Very specific, very balanced. Do you think they could work? She asked, vulnerability clear in her expression. I think they're worth trying, I replied honestly. Better than what we did before, which was basically just hope things would magically improve without any actual plan. Emily smiled, relief evident in her face. That's what I thought too. We're both intelligent people. We should be able to problem solve our relationship the way you approach surgical complications. I added another item to her list, regular check-ins about how these solutions are working, monthly at first, to make adjustments as needed. She read what I'd written and nodded approvingly. That's good. Prevents small issues from becoming big ones. So where do we go from here? Emily asked finally. Slowly, I suggested. Maybe we start with dates, get to know each other again outside the crisis situation that brought us back together. See how it feels before making any permanent decisions. I'd like that, she said softly. A fresh start, but with the benefit of already knowing each other well. As we left the restaurant, I walked Emily to her car, the cool evening air pleasant against my skin. At her vehicle, she turned to face me, her expression both hopeful and uncertain. Thank you for tonight, she said, for being willing to try again, for not giving up on us completely. I could say the same to you, I replied. After all, you're the one who reached out, who suggested we might still have a chance. Emily smiled, then stepped closer and rose on tiptoe to kiss my cheek. Good night, Jack. As she pulled away, I caught her hand, holding her in place for a moment longer. Emily, I said, my voice lower than I intended. I've missed you more than I let myself admit. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened. I've missed you too. This time when she leaned in, our lips met in a gentle kiss, brief but laden with promise. When we separated, she squeezed my hand once before getting into her car. Call me tomorrow, she asked through the open window. I nodded. I will. As I watched her drive away, I felt a curious mixture of emotions: hope, anxiety, anticipation, caution. We were embarking on something both familiar and entirely new, with no guarantees of success but a shared determination to try differently this time.